What's up, everyone? In this episode, skateboarder Dan Edmondson talks about reclaiming your life after things go wrong. So tune in.
Through that tragedy taught me life is finite. You really have a short window to take what it is from life that you want and enjoy it.
You can go back to that day, February 18, 1990, and change what happened. My honest answer is I wouldn't change it.
You're just going to have to go through it, and your strength is going to be found in simply going through it and being authentic and real in the process.
I was talking with my palliative care doctor today, and she turned around to me and she looked at me and she was like, do you think that you'll eventually beat this? And I was sort of like, yeah, that's probably what I'm trying to do.
No, nothing will ever take away the pain of my daughter not being here. It's my reality.
Well, I know what my body's going to do to me. I've got a wheelchair in my future, but you know what I've been looking for?
What's that?
One with off-road wheel.
Just remembering me as I am, happy and energetic and full of life, no matter what.
You can expect life to kick you in the teeth, but you always get back up, no matter what, and you just keep going.
Living Adaptive with Scott Davidson, a podcast about learning to live adaptively.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I am hanging with Dan Edmondson right now. Dan is heavily involved in the worldwide skateboarding community. Dan Edmondson is a downhill skater and is an integral part of the Adaptive Skate Kollective. Dan has a pretty intense story. We're lucky to have him on and hear his story and take in some of the wisdom he gained after hitting the challenges that life gave him. What's up, Dan Edmondson? Thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely. Good to have you.
All right, let's get this underway. I'm looking at a pic of you right now throttling downhill on a longboard. How fast do you go, and do you ever get really screwed up doing this, like crash?
Top speed, maybe about 50. That's at Maryhill, and my phone gets absolutely no service. So I used to use like a ski tracker to find out, altitude and, time and speed. But I've never been able to use it out there. But, people tell me that that's roughly about how fast I was going. So, yeah.
I just watched a documentary on downhill skaters, and I just thought it was nuts. They're just kind of riding up on, they had like a Winnebago, like an old school one, flying down the hill. I'm like, damn, just one slip, and it could be crazy.
It's not the safest sport out there. So you really have to know your limits and be smart about it. I do not go on open road. And I've actually got a friend who just recently she's recovering from some paralysis because she hit a guardrail. So she's becoming adaptive skater now too, relearning how to do all of that. It's a dangerous sport. I mean, it's fast speeds. I wouldn't go anywhere with oncoming traffic. There's people, you go online and they're going 100 miles an hour, next to semis, and it's like, that's not for me.
Yeah, hell with that. I'm not doing that. No way. I mean, I used to do some wild stuff growing up, but that'd be one that I would definitely shy away from. It's just too fast, too crazy. You got to have too much coordination for me, and
yeah. Well, I mean, there's some of these guys they're just ducks to water, 90 is comfortable. Yeah, and your second question, have I ever gotten really fucked up, like crashing or whatever? No, I'm actually really fortunate. When I first started, I was still wearing my prosthetics. Mm-hmm. Kind of the goal was to relearn how to skate standing up. And I'd actually gotten to the point, there's a little Stone Arch Bridge isn't that far from my house, and it's just like a little 25, maybe 30 mile an hour little hill with a little curve in it under a bridge. And it's a good place if you just want to like warm up or get some speed, but it's the only place I'd ever really done downhill other than like some suburban streets. And it was really dangerous just because with the prosthetic, one of the biggest problems with being a bilateral amputee is it makes it really hard to get low. Like if you were to do a squat, I'd be all on my toes, my heels would be up. And so you see the riders that go really fast and then they're headed into a turn. They'll get down, they'll grab the board, or they'll do a standee and they'll slide the board sideways to cut speed. And that's really hard for me to do because I'm putting additional heel or toe pressure.
Gotcha.
Whichever way I'm leaning because of the prosthetic. So it makes it really hard to get low. And when you're learning, especially, you need to be able to take these turns and these skids and these slides low because you get hurt less when you're low. if you're standing, it'll buck you. If you're going, the toe side standy and the wheels grip, you're going head over heels backwards, so you better be wearing a helmet. And I've been able to toe side slide to a stop just for safety. But that was as far as I ever got with it. And I sort of realized that there were some limitations to the prosthetics that I really could commit and probably could get, progress, but I might break the collarbone doing it.
Yeah.
And when you're 35 and you got work to pay the bills and, you do not want to do that to yourself.
Got you. Now I think we should hit on this because you mentioned prosthetics. So people understand, and I don't know how long ago this was, but you were in an accident. I think it was within the last 6 years, something like that.
Yeah. 4 years ago, February 1st, 2014. I jumped on a freight train and fell between the cars and was run over. So that's a tricky one to tell people, because if you're an amputee, most of the time they ask me if, should I thank you for your service? I'm like, no, I wasn't in the military. Or, was it a motorcycle? No. Or was it a car? No. Those things don't shock people, but when you tell them it was a train accident, they always have follow-up questions. Your
story's out there. There's a lot of details about it, but it's definitely crazy, man. Hopping on a train. I know you had experience doing that before. And so something that wasn't, you're completely new to, and it's just one of those, I don't know, freak accidents that happen. It sounded like.
Yeah, it's a tricky one for a couple of reasons. One thing I'll say though is that because I go to the Amputee Coalition of America's conferences, and I'll do. I was a counselor at their summer camp for a year. I volunteer for different nonprofits. I've been to Pirate Camp with Never Say Never Foundation. I mean, there's all kinds of fun stuff to be at. And through that, I've actually met several amputee train accident victims. Cameron Clapp, Mark Farrell. I'm in double digits now for people I've looked in the eye and shook their hand in their train accident victims. It's a tricky one though, because it's sort of kind of in the same vein of, let's say that you lost your leg because you got drunk on your motorcycle. Your own fault. You wake up in the hospital, your leg or legs are gone, and you really you can't blame anything but yourself at that point, because if cancer took your leg, you can blame cancer and you can say fuck cancer and I'm going to get over this and whatever. But when you are the sole cause, because you acted an idiot, because you did something dumb, take how many people are in a depressive state when amputation happens, just in any fashion, and then add on top of that personal guilt. Yeah. And if you're depressed and then you're mixing in, the morphine that they gave you to take home, and the oxycodones and the hydrocodones, and the Vicodins, and you can end up in a dark spot real quick. It's no surprise there's a lot of homeless amputees out there. Yeah. That's what I was. One thing I actually threw down as a question is, during the healing process, a lot of people, whether it's a car accident, which is really, really, really freaking common, or something like that, do not show compassion to themselves, because it's not like somebody set out to have this happen. It's just not. The universe does what it does, and that includes cancer and everything else. And there is similarities there. It's just something that was not necessarily totally in control, and it's not like you set out for it. Did you find yourself at some point finally giving yourself compassion? Yeah. Honestly, pretty much instantly. Cool. Before my accident, I was just, I was in a state where I was dealing with a lot of stress, a lot of interpersonal stress, a lot of work stress. I just wasn't in a good way. Just really stressed out, kind of dealing with problems. So when the train happened, it sort of punctuated all of that dread. It's like I was going through all these different things, and it seemed like every time I'd get up, my shoelaces were tied together and I'd fall back down again. And it kind of became a pattern. But with the train, it sort of punctuated all of that. And when I woke up and sort of had this to deal with, none of the old mechanisms were going to work anymore. being angry, being sad, blaming myself, like all this baggage that I was carrying before the train, I suddenly didn't have the mental energy to carry it anymore and just let it go. And that's really, that's the only way I can really describe it, other than, I was going through a rough time. The train happened. And then after that, I was only trying to focus on things that were going to make me better.
What was the first thing you did to focus on to make you better?
Laugh.
Like at what? What did you watch? What did you do?
At anything, cracking leg jokes and messing with the nurses and, like just being goofy, telling your friends you love them.
So it seems like you have a good community around you already, or you've just built it.
I mean, you gotta build it a little bit. It's not just going to show up on your doorstep. Although I did have people that stepped out, Mark Mann, who's a great friend, Paralympic snowboarder that, lives here in Minnesota. And, he was the first person to visit me in the hospital, or the first other amputee to visit me. And he'd only been an amputee for a couple of months himself. So, pretty much right away, I had an into some of the community. But part of it I had to cultivate. I had to go out and find my interests, and I had to reach out and, find people. And social media makes that really easy. And so that was really huge. And the funny thing too is then you start meeting these people and you find out how many similarities that we have in our stories, and as far as things that we've been through and things that we've experienced, and then it, it's good because it gives you that outlet that you need to be able to talk about it. Like personally for me, I stopped going to physical therapy because I took care of it on my own. And I stopped, and I never went to any psychotherapy or anything like that, because I have friends I can lean on. I have people I can really bear the truth to.
Cool.
And that's all that stuff's important. Then you have those milestones of the first time you go snowboarding, how good that makes you feel. And it makes you recognize that there are certain things that you haven't lost. And that list of things that you've lost just seems to get smaller and smaller and smaller as you get some of them back. And that's important for new amputees. They need support groups. They need friends and resources, because when you get a prosthetic leg the first time, you don't really know how to use it. You get frustrated. There's a lot of people that wear their prosthetic leg and they go back and tell their doctor it hurts, and they never wear one again, and they just stay in the wheelchair, which, and you can have a really active life in a wheelchair, but you kind of got to commit to learning how to use a prosthetic if you want one.
Well, you got a really positive approach the way you're talking right now. I clipped one of your writings, and you stated, early on, as I recognized I had an opportunity to approach my new life with positivity. I knew that how I dealt with this was going to set the tone for my future. Instead of being upset or dwelling on things that I can't change, I started laughing harder and hugging harder. After a terrifying near-death experience, I saw this as an opportunity to refocus my life and grow as a person. How did you cultivate that positive attitude? Was it there already? I know you were talking about their struggles and stuff. Were you already a positive person? Did you lean on something? What made you so have such a good attitude approaching everything?
I mean, yeah, I was always a positive person. I think that's something to say about my time before the accident, where I was. The tricky thing is that how do I want to? I don't know if I want to launch into it completely, but, the not all scars are visible. And so, you might meet someone on the street and they have a very obvious physical disability, and you might ask, what happened to you? And it's kind of a rude question, because what if I went up to you and asked,
Totally,
what happened to you? Why don't you tell me your deepest, darkest secret, stranger? And I do think it's something that's interesting to address, especially, considering, just that it's a sort of frames a conversation, but, I'd kind of, my 20s had kind of been filled with a couple of hiccups, whether it was, dealing with things within my family, or, there's, for the couple of years leading up to my accident, I was in an abusive relationship. And it's something that you don't hear often, coming from guys, that have, been victims of abuse from women. But she was great when I met her, but she was an alcoholic, and she started taking pills, and the two of those that she, up and down, and she got violent. For a while I was trying to help her, but it turns out, what I was doing was just enabling her. And At the time, I didn't have, I just didn't feel like I had the resources. I kind of got sucked in that trap, and I didn't know how to get out. And that's a common story for victims of abuse, is that they're caring people, and they're trying to be there for somebody, and they want them to get better, and they're trying so hard to their own detriment that it can truly blow up in their face. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened to me. It had gotten to a point where it was just enough was enough, and kicked her out of the apartment, and then went out with some friends, and then jumped on a train. And it's a very weird thing to think about, because had I died that day, no note, no phone call, it would have been assumed a suicide. People would have looked at what I was going through in my life, and they would have said, oh, well, I don't know why you did it, but whatever. And that thought went through my head as I don't know if it was while I was lying there afterwards, but it definitely crossed my mind, where I wouldn't have been able to tell my parents goodbye. I wouldn't have been able to tell them why, that was a really tough thing to deal with. But, people have asked me, well, why did you jump on the train? And I think that sometimes in life, you're kind of pushed to the brink, whether emotionally or physically, and people lash out in the weirdest of ways. Maybe they get behind their motorcycle drunk, or maybe they blow a lot of money at a casino and do a bunch of cocaine. There are people that will sort of, what I call hell at the moon situations, where they're just ready to cut loose and do something dangerous. And there's science behind that, because it lights up your prefrontal cortex. And when you're dealing with a lot of issues, when you go into that survival mode, it sort of centers everything. And because one of the things with adrenaline is it sort of soaks out all the other external stimuli, so you can focus on the task at hand. And, when your mind is a jumble, that's what you crave, is razor sharp focus. And so people end up in these situations where they're traumatized and they're stressed to the max, and then they do something stupid and dangerous. And sometimes that thing is suicide, but sometimes it's just an act of desperation. And I think that's important to recognize, because it comes up in my story. I bring up the fact that I had to deal with personal guilt, and then I had to learn how to forgive myself for what happened. But it kind of just came to a point where I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I'd been pushed around by life enough. And then the train happened, and I was still alive. And then, that kind of just, I could only see two, I couldn't even see two options. Negativity just wasn't there, because it was so counterproductive to what I needed to do.
Wow. That's a damn big story, man, right there. That's an impressive, what you just shared. And I think you're right, though. I know so many people that have, operated in the same manner, where it gets that wild and life is that crazy. And at some point you just need to let loose, and everybody does it in their own way, so, but it's very similar sometimes. I hope I said that right.
No, it makes perfect sense. And, you talk to people, and then some of their biggest mistakes are after some of their biggest tragedies.
Yeah, it does seem like it follows something like that, right?
Yeah, and that's a tricky thing, too, because, there's a lot of people out there that they become amputees, and then they get this breath of possibility and positivity from the community, from themselves, and then they sort of, go and march into life with this newfound confidence, and then something else happens. You wreck your car, you lose your job, your spouse leaves you, and all of a sudden it's just God, all this hard work and all this climbing the mountain, only to realize that life is still hard.
Life is so fucking hard, man. I wish people could understand that more. I don't embrace it. I live in denial, but that is kind of the way of life. Yeah.
And so it became about, for me, it was focusing, having good people in my life and good things to do. And sort of learning from my experiences and trying to grow from them. And the funny thing is I still trip up. I still learn hard lessons. One of the most recent ones, I was dealing with, the fact that my last relationship was a really treacherous one. And so the next time something actually good came along, I didn't know how to behave, because I'd sort of, hadn't had a model of a good relationship in way too long. And so there's all these moments where you trip and you're like, oh man, I'm still learning. I'm still growing. I'm still making mistakes. But I mean, failure is just part of your process. You know, it has to be, because life's not going to be perfect. So learning from your failures is huge. And I think that's something that when you're an amputee, especially when the cause that something is you could easily blame on yourself, you know, that's a step you have to take. It's a leap of faith, just to believe that you can come out of this a better person.
I was talking in another interview, and a recent one with Pete McGregor. We're talking about, like, you know, everything's going well right now. And you know, for him, he hasn't had another surgery, and he had so many, and it's been a long time since he started doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and everything's going right. But he knew in his head, you know, something else is going to pop up. And I think that's a good mindset, to expect that at some point you're going to have to traverse another challenge, whatever it is, maybe medical, maybe mental, whatever it is.
Yeah. And but there's definitely a lesson in that too, is that you can definitely get to a state where you've aligned things in your life and things are going great, you know, and those of us who have been through tragedy, we're always looking around the corner for where's the next little scary monster to jump out. You know, cause you kind of been trained to. Yeah, for sure. You know, unless your life's perfect and you just got no worries, not a care in the world, but like, you know, most people aren't like that. And so I think it's a lesson too of, when you are in a state where you're doing well and you're happy and things are going well, to not take them for granted. You know, to sort of just ride that wave as long as you can and not find reasons not to be happy. You know, because there are people out there that they might feel that they don't deserve to be happy. They're happy for a minute, and then they're like, there was that shitty thing I did though, and they got right back to that dark place right away. Yeah. And I think it's a lesson about happiness, that when you are happy, you have to practice it. And it's kind of like being on a skateboard, you know, because you're on that thing and you're going 50 miles an hour, and you got one thought on your mind: don't crash. Yeah. Well, maybe not don't crash, but like, you know, there's also the sheer joy and exhilaration of it. Like, I remember that first trip run down Maryhill. I got about halfway down, and I just like, I was crying in my helmet because it was so beautiful. It's something I've been looking forward to for so long. And you know, when you catch a wave like that, like you gotta be willing to ride it all the way to the end. And you might crash, you might fail, but the bigger failure is not letting yourself be happy longer. Kind
of like rewind where you were at. Did you like you said you didn't go to psychotherapy? You did PT on your own, which is pretty badass, by the way. The PT on your own too. You had friends that you relied on. Is there any other sources? What would you point someone to that's going through something tough right now? That you used that helped you get over the hump? It could be a book, could be a tool, could be a part. Sure. You know, like, what was it?
A hula hoop.
For real?
Yeah. There's and I could list a bunch of other things too, but when you mentioned physical therapy, and one of my first physical therapy sessions, they were having me do this. Like, it was one of my first times walking on prosthetics, mm-hmm. And I started goofing off. I grabbed the therapy balls and started juggling. And I'm juggling these balls, and like, inevitably when you're juggling, one gets away from you and you got to chase it. And so I'm doing this on the prosthetic, you know, and so when you do something like that, or when you do something like hula hooping, where you're like throwing your weight around and you're turning around in circles and you're doing things, what you're doing is you're calling on these actions the way that they were built in your mind, the way that you know them when you had legs. It's motor memory. But because you have something to focus on, you're not concerned or thinking much about exactly what your feet are doing. And that's the thing, is like, you know, amputees will just be staring at their feet. And I'm like, no, stare at a spot on the wall. You need to attention your focus elsewhere, and just trust that the thing is going to work the way that it should. And I find that that's true with extreme sports with prosthetics. If you ask skateboarders, for instance, they feel the vibration of those wheels under there. It's like their prosthetic is almost a part of them. They're familiar with replacing their feet if they have to. You know, they've kind of learned how to do that with this ankle that they can't control, because you are relying on some motor memory there. And so I think that's something that people need to do is, you know, you think, oh, I got my leg and it, you know, kind of hurts sometimes, and I don't know if I can get on my bike. Well, fucking try. Yeah. You know, like, and you might fall over. I did. I bought a tricycle. I started doing that just to get the leg strength. And then
like one of those full size tricycles. Like, those are great. I see them on the beach all the time. Like Peach
Oh,
Sport.
someone stole it.
Yeah.
I had it for 2 years.
No.
We had it decked out. I had instead of a basket, it had skate decks on the back.
Yeah.
And the fenders were hand pinstriped. I had it between the two garages, and someone stole it.
Damn.
But yeah, it's a bummer. But now it's to the point where like I can run with my bike, hop on the pedal, throw my leg over and go. And you know, those things just take practice. And so if you're a new amputee, if you're going through something and you want to get something back, you just have to be willing to fail and try again. And don't expect you're going to get it on the first try. You know, there was one time I went out mountain biking and like the vacuum wasn't working. I was sweating, and just every time I'd pedal, it'd just slip off my knee. And I got so angry, you know, in the middle of the woods, I take off the prosthetic and I throw it at a tree, and I'm just like, fucking thing.
Yeah.
And you got to have those moments. You're going to have those moments. But, you know, try to control them, try to stay focused, be zen as much as you can, know that it's good and bad. And then you got to learn how to use this shit. You know, like when you're going through socket changes, you gotta, I had tricks like I'd put business cards in between the flexible inner liner and the carbon fiber if I needed a little bit more pressure in one area, because it wasn't as aggressive as like a pad, but it sort of just squeezed everything in a bit. And sometimes I'd double them up, or I'd carve foam that the prosthetist gave me and double tape it in there.
Do you list these online though?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is, I mean, Amputee Coalition of America does a good job of posting stuff like that. Yeah, some of it is easy to find, but you're not going to find everything, and you're not going to find exactly the thing that you need to see. You know, you might find a general tip, because the thing is this is such an individualized thing, and then you take into account, you know, like every other kind of disability, people who wear braces and things like that. Like this stuff has to be custom fit, and none of us are alike. And I tell my doctor, I remember my prosthetist, I told him that I want to treat my legs independently. I don't necessarily want to have the same system on my left as I do on my right. I don't think they should be on the same timeline of when I get a new one. You know, it should be when this one needs to work is when it needs to work.
If somebody's out there listening right now, they want to get back out skating, they had an injury, they want to get back out there, maybe they're older like me, you know what I mean? We're no longer teens getting on a board. What's like the first things to do?
If you want to get on a board, just, you know, I don't want to say don't set the bar high, but you got to realize that you might not be Tony Hawk. You know, that you never want to compare yourself to other skaters, because you're you and you skate the way that you skate. And you don't have to be better than anybody else out there. You just have to be better than you were the day before. And so just keep doing it, you know, and if it feels good and all you're doing is rolling down a ramp, great. You're developing, you know, board balance, response to the terrain changes. Find a bigger hill, find something that's not so scary that you can try. Like you have to start low. Because I mean, if you're a brand new skateboarder and you drop in on a 12-foot bowl, you're going to hurt yourself. You need to build up those skills. And because it's adaptive, no one's going to be able to do it the way that you do it.
You work with a group called the Adaptive Skate Kollective, and that's with a K. Before I forget, I want to bring this up. So the collective is spelled with a K. And with this group, it seems like you're running a bunch of clinics. What is this all about?
The next generation, man. The thing is, like, you look at snowboarding, it's been around a little bit longer, but look at how popular it is in the Olympics.
Yeah, it's huge.
You know, and then Paralympic snowboarding too. And then you take into account that they just added skateboarding into the Olympics, you know, and like we're trying to build this thing up. We've got people on the Paralympic committee to add skateboarding. They're discussing this and like finding out what we need to do. And, you know, cause like you need to have state, regional, world championships leading up to that. You need to have a system in place for the cream of the crop to rise to the calling of the Olympics. And so, you know, sometimes we do these contests and we'll be out in California, whether it's Sheckler Foundation, Skate for a Cause, or like Life Rolls On, or, you know, all these other ones that go on. And we got to really push. We got to, like, we feel like we have a big enough community, but, you know, sometimes we need to call people and be like, hey, are you coming to Cali? Because right now we've only got 7, you know, and they're out there, and I manage that Instagram page. So like whenever I find a new one, I post them just so we have a Rolodex of where these people are. Like the Brazilians are crazy. The Germans, like that's where it's headed. It's headed to the Paralympics. And that's the thing is the Paralympics isn't even the goal. It's just the visibility. We want people to see this so that that kid who just lost his leg from cancer, he's 12, you know, like maybe he doesn't want to be a track and field star. Maybe he hates running. And maybe he you know, listens to Motorhead and wants to be a skater.
Yeah, for sure,
you know, like, and they need to know that it's a possibility for them and have avenues and places to go in a community. Like, you know, so now, like, the more that starts popping up, and we have kids that have reached out to us because they either, you know, they're connected through one of the hospitals or one of the other groups that's out there, and they hear about this skate thing and like, oh, my kid wants to try skateboarding. And I met a parent once that I had a conversation about how difficult it was sometimes to get a parent of a child with a disability to let them try this, because a lot of kids with a disability are sometimes sheltered and held back by their parents. You know, they've been dealing with their health issues for a while, and they're really protective, and they don't want them to get hurt. And the thing is when you're growing up, like, you have to skin your knee. You have to test your boundaries. You have to understand your own mortality. You know, like, you have to know how to push yourself and what your limits are. But I talked with this parent, and she's like, no, I don't shelter him from shit. You know, he's going to try it, and he's going to, you know, if he falls down, he's going to get up and do it again. And she recognized that if she was coddling her disabled son, that he was going to be like that for the rest of his life. You know, and skateboarding is one of those things. It's definitely something you can identify with. Like, if you're not into those other sports, or maybe you are, but like this is something you feel drawn to, because like any skater knows it's in your blood. You know, you either are or you aren't. And there's very little people that are sort of just on the cusp, or like, you know, disinterested in skateboarding. It's either you gravitate towards it or you don't.
Well, to kind of rewind a little bit, I don't want to skip this because I think it's important, but the Adaptive Skate Kollective is a nonprofit. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it's like to be part of this nonprofit?
We are an established 501c3 nonprofit.
Yep.
The tricky thing is that it's a very difficult culture to start a nonprofit. We don't have the resources. We all work full-time jobs. We've been pushing, and we end up usually doing a lot of these trips out of our own pocket. You know, the fundraising that we've done has fallen flat on its face. You know, just we can't get financial community support. And, you know, because like it's the weirdest thing, because you would think like a Nike would be all about this, you know,
especially nowadays, man. Come on, with the Nike skateboarding shoes, everything. I mean, you would think they showed a lot of adversity in the Kaepernick commercial. You know, they showed a lot of things going on. Like, what the fuck, man? Come on, Nike, you get your skateboarding shoes.
We can't. You know, and someone has to just see that it's profitable, because it's going to the Paralympics and it's going to be the gnarliest fucking sport there.
But you know what pisses me off? That like something like Toy Machine or something like that. I don't know what's out there right now, but back in the day it was like Toy Machine, Blind Skateboard. Somebody like that isn't picking it up either.
Yeah. No, we just, you know, it's how many skaters out there, you know, trying to get sponsored?
Yeah.
You know, like there's not just one, there's hundreds of us, you know, all across Brazil and US and, you know, Canada and all this stuff. And like, you know, the thing is, we need funding. Like, I'm doing the skate clinic for this Sunday, and we're being sponsored by Wiggle Your Toes, which is a local organization here in Minneapolis. They also do work out in New York, and they're expanding, and they're the proper fundraising model for a nonprofit, and they put their money where their mouth is. You know, and they're really like a good example of how to run a good nonprofit. And they gave me a $3,000 budget to run this clinic. You know, but after you buy a couple of plane tickets for some pros and you rent the facility, you get the hotels. I mean, that $3,000 goes real quick. It's gone. And the thing is, we have kids, you know, that are coming to this thing that have been emailing me for weeks about how excited they are, because like this wasn't in the cards before. There's adaptive skaters that have gone to third layer, and they'll talk to the desk staff, and they'll be like, oh, you should check out Adaptive Skate Kollective. And then I get their phone call, and it's like, they're out there, and there's kids out there that want to skate.
What's crazy to me though, is there's a ton out there. And then, gosh, it pisses me off, especially just knowing how the roots were, that they aren't, like, some other companies aren't picking it up. Or
this is what it is. The Adaptive Skate Kollective, we've kind of been demoted to just being a skate team again, because being a nonprofit was just too freaking exhausting. Like we'd have so many people promise us, and that, we'll help get this off the ground with you, and we'll get big names, interested. And it's just like, we got to grind too. And like, none of us got a lot of money, like we make enough money to pay our rent and get by. And we got to cover our own way when we go do this stuff. Unless you've gotten a CAF grant, which I encourage all of our athletes to do. I write their letters of recommendation for them. I help them fill out applications, even if I have to talk to them over the phone. But I can't do it for them. It's like they've got to be the driver if they want to be able to get that travel money to do this stuff. They've got to put in the work. And when it runs out, and we pay our own way. So like that stuff is for flights and hotels, but it's not your gear, it's not your food, it's not any of that. It's not your time away from work if you're hourly.
It's your chance to be part of it. And there's reward in that, man. There's huge reward in it.
No, it's Fight Club, man. It's choose your own level of involvement. You either want to be there or you don't.
I like that. I like that as Fight Club.
Yeah.
That's good. You earlier we talked about this. You have a coloring book out there. It's pretty great. Seems like it goes to a lot of awareness. You're an artist too. You're an artist. It seems like in general you're an artist. And so like this coloring book, that was the purpose of just building awareness that, hey, we're skating too.
Yeah. That's what it became, but that's not necessarily where it came from. So I started drawing after my accident, just as a coping tool. I just continued drawing, but, I started doing, like pop culture icons with amputations. But yeah, I started drawing these like comics and cartoons, and then I drew Bart Simpson with a prosthetic leg on a skateboard, and that's when it clicked. And I started picking pictures of my friends and outlining them and building backgrounds around them and putting it all together. And it was definitely a learning process. For the first one I did was Justin, and when it was done, I was just like, oh, man, I'm gonna have to make a book. And so I did somebody else, and I kept doing it until I had, 25, 30 pages, and started researching what I needed to do. Fundraising, printing's not cheap. A lot of them, the first order went to nonprofits. I gave a lot of people them for free. I gave them at a discount. I'd give them away at adaptive events for families. And ultimately I broke even. I didn't sell enough of them to break even on the cost of the printing. But then Wiggle Your Toes again stepped up, helped me out with the reprint cost. Now we're up and running. It's going to be ready to order by Thanksgiving. So
nice. I saw some on Amazon. I'm going to link what's available if that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of stuff in there that's not skateboarding anymore, but I kept the title just because I think it's all skate just as a metaphor for doing what you love to do. There's a lot of skateboarding stuff in there, and there's people in there that aren't disabled. There's several people in that book that don't have any physical disability whatsoever, but they were part of the culture of me getting back on the board, and the people that I met, the support structure I had, the people I looked up to. And so the other thing too is if you give that to a kid, they start coloring and they don't notice the disability until they color it in.
You're doing a lot of stuff you want to do, and you're following a lot of your passions. What is the process that you applied to go after that? Like how did you approach all the things? Like people have to have everyday jobs. You talked about it. People have responsibilities. They have regular life, family life, whatever it is, bachelor's life. It doesn't matter. There's always something. What is it that you do to get on that path, to go after what you want to do?
First you just got to set a goal, for me, Mary Hill was like that. It was a pilgrimage. It's sort of, this place had sort of consumed my thoughts, and I was having dreams about this place. And so, then it kind of, all of the skateboarding I was doing was work towards that. And then I got there and it was totally not what it was what I expected, but the fact that I had to do it on my knees was different. And so you kind of have to realize that when you get there, your goals might not be exactly what you set out to do. But you might end up in an even more amazing place.
So you talked about, we talked about some of the organizations you're with. When you think of what are you planning for in the future? What's your plans in the future?
I mean, I'd love to be able to do the adaptive skate thing full time. I mean, like if this was something where I could help, and really like anything adaptive, like I'd love to be an adaptive swim coach. I just have so many interests, and I feel like that I'm well suited to work within the adaptive community as support, in sports and stuff. So, I mean, I'd love to see it go that direction.
What is the biggest thing that changed outside of the physical between before accident to now?
I don't know. I've been trying more to appreciate the good things, like on a stronger level, like just soak up all that sap, like that goes back to that whole, when you're happy, don't find reasons not to be. And the thing is realizing that it's not all going to be bells and whistles and flashy things. It's not always going to be, a wake surf competition. Like you got to be okay, on a bored, rainy weekend. You got to be okay with yourself, and you got to be okay with the calm in between all the awesome. And to realize that sometimes it's, you're going to go through the whole gamut of human emotion, but like just keep your head above you, and set goals and try them and be willing to fail, and don't give up when you fail.
What is advice that you listen to, in your early life, like when you're growing up, maybe early 20s, whatever, that you think is bad advice now?
Don't define your happiness by the things that you own. For me, it's like I've never really been, the kind to like go spend extra on a brand new TV. If you're going to keep things around, make sure that they have value. So I think that's what it is. Like it not necessarily to minimalize. It doesn't mean you have to throw out your book collection, but share one of those books with somebody, get joy out of these things the way that they're intended to do by having them be tools to have experiences with people. Cause that's the better thing to own is your time that you spend, and even if it's by yourself. Like I got a kayak in the garage, and that thing's, big old beefy kayak, but it's worth keeping around because even when I'm out there by myself, like it's peace of mind and it's exercise and those are the things that are important. The kayak's not important. It's what you get out of it. And I think it's just keeping that focus on things, whether it's, your food, just, taking time to prepare things and to eat healthy. Like those are things that are valuable.
Cool.
A small scale things that are valuable, but like you got to apply that to the bigger stuff too. Like that, it comes down to I'm living life without my legs right now. Like would it be interesting if I could just like snap my finger and have my legs back and, but, just acceptance of the path that you're on, cause you can't go back. Past is past. And, so that's what sort of focused is just, shifting so that you were paying attention of where you're at now and living in the moment. And it all sounds like cliche stuff, and it's hard to do. It's something that I don't do all that well all that time. You have to practice it over and over and over again. It takes discipline too.
Accepting what happened is something everybody will do at some point, because somebody in your life is going to die, a loved one, somebody you care about. Something's going to happen that's traumatic. And, trauma is often relative to the person, what some consider traumatic or not to others. But you got to accept those that are going through the tough stuff, those that are dealing with the tough stuff. How did you come to acceptance, or did you yet? For me, it's been, certain things I haven't accepted in my life, and I'm attempting to accept it, and I'm not going to pretend like I did. Other things I've accepted. It's just out of my control. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm. The way I put it is I'm not disabled until something breaks or I'm in pain. If I lose vacuum in my leg, it makes it harder for me to drive. I got to take it off and switch and drive with my left foot. Like I don't have hand controls, and this, every now and then you kind of end up in this pigeonholed in this frustrating corner where you don't really have an easy solution. And it sort of brings up all those feelings of like the loss that you had and like having this disability and like, oh, fuck. Why did this happen? Or, but like that, I never really dwelled in those questions. Like you just kind of have to, it's like I was saying about, you get up and you kind of feel emboldened and you get some brevity back, and like and then something happens and then you realize that life is still hard, but if you can focus on, finding efficient solutions for yourself, finding things that work for you, things that make you happy. And they may have to shift a bit. When you set that goal, don't make it so rigid that it's unattainable. But don't set it too low either. You kind of have to find that healthy spot where you're challenging yourself. Because if you're always doing stuff that's comfortable, like what fun is that? Like you've got to be able to push your boundaries outside of what you're used to, and you need to kind of know where to set that bar. Mm-hmm. And that's something that's true in skateboarding too. Like I was saying, you wouldn't drop in on a 12 foot if you're a beginner. You kind of have to be better than you were the day before and challenge yourself to do something that's difficult, because that's how you learn about yourself.
What if we had listeners that are listening, right? Not listeners listening. That sounds crazy. No, what if somebody's listening, they want to hang out, skate with you? You cool with that? Like, can they show up? Can they hit you on Instagram? What can they do to contact you?
All those things, hey, if you're in the Midwest, let's go hit up Third Layer, or Familia, or some of the outdoor stuff. Or if you're doing downhill, absolutely. Like the thing is, we're kind of all over. So like, it's a good thing to go to that Adaptive Skate Kollective page and, follow it and see where these people are from. Cause you might find somebody in your backyard. And even if you don't, get out there and start skating, because it's not like you have to meet adaptive skaters. You can just go meet skaters. That's the cool thing about this skate stuff is when I go to these things, like if I go to the skate park, people see me rolling around without my legs on. None of the skaters come up to ask what happened to me. None of them are interested in my tragedy. They're just like, dude, you're skating. That's sick. That's always the reaction. And it's like, they don't see me as a person with a disability. They only see me as a skater. And like, that's a cool thing, is like when you have a disability and you need to get away from feeling like that for a little bit, hop on a skateboard and get good at it. Because then, it shifts the paradigm. Like it's so cool, like how supportive skaters are when they find out about this, they want to learn more. And then I show them the Adaptive Skate Kollective page and their minds are blown, and the more this happens, it's like Paralympics just upped the purse prize. They now earn the same amount for a gold medal as the regular Olympians.
Yeah, I saw
they
that.
used to make less. And it proves that point. Like as we move forward in the future, there's going to be more people with bionic limbs, more people with robotic eyes and, replaced body parts. And it's going to become more the norm. You're seeing it more in advertising. You're seeing it more in sport. The fact that they just made Paralympics equal is a huge win. And it's not a huge win for Paralympics. It's a huge win for equality across the board, because it sets the standard that my troubles are no greater than yours, and that you're no less an athlete, or no less a person, like that. And that's super important. If anything you're going through, like it levels the playing field, like we're all here.
Skating and snowboarding, we all knew it was pretty competitive. There was a community, but still, even if you're just watching from the Warped Tour in the 90s, like 99 or something, whatever it was, the first Warped Tour, 96, I don't know. They were still competing when they were getting out there on a ramp, even though there's no formal competition. And it was cool to see that, but now you're seeing it formalized. You're seeing this process happening. Like you said, a lot of kids don't want to strap on a football helmet. It just doesn't interest them. They want to listen to some punk music or whatever it is and get out there and just skate and do that, because that's their interest. And so it's growing big. You're part of the process to make it grow.
What's really great is like when you see all these people that are professionals, and you put them in front of a kid who's trying to learn, and like they're more involved with that than they are with learning that trick or landing that trick. It's like every one of us like rises up to the chance to try to grow the community or to try to help someone. It's cool because the more it's out there, there's going to be kids who see it, who gravitate towards it. And we see it all the time where like we've done these abilities expos where there's, adaptive equipment and people can walk around and check it out, and they can see like the wheelchair rugby demonstration. They can see the adaptive skate demonstration. And there's always one kid who finds us and like never leaves. And he's just on the board the whole time that his parents are walking around checking this stuff out.
That's cool.
And like, that's the kid we're trying to reach, because he may be 6 now, but he's going to get older, and he's going to, what if he grew up with an orthotic brace on his leg and a limp in his walk? Doesn't mean he can't longboard in college, get to class pushing around on a pintail.
Yeah, for sure.
It sort of sets it up for him. Like, this is a thing that it can be part of his identity and he can do. And it's super cool to see that. Like, it's kind of been around long enough. Like, I used to teach swim lessons, and I have had it happen or actually lifeguarding classes. I taught a lifeguarding class, and there was a kid in my class who I had taught swim lessons to when he was 6, and like, to know that he'd progressed to the point where now he's a certified lifeguard. It's like, whoa, time flies. And like, that's what it's going to be like with these kids. Like, the more opportunities like this that there are, we're going to pass the torch. I don't want to do this forever. Like, I want this, like, if anything, I'd like to be mentioned in the skateboarding history books as part of this, but like, it's so not about me, and it's not about any of us now. It's about the next one that's coming. Because, excellence breeds excellence. Like, they're going to see what we do, and they're going to outdo it. And that's what we want to see happen.
That's really rad, man. For sure. That's super rad. And I hope it happens. I hope it builds up. I hope you guys get funded like crazy. I hope lots of people follow you. I hope it builds, man. There's a great, big, beautiful world in this adaptive, skate collective. And so I hope it happens, man. And seriously, I appreciate you coming on. And so I really appreciate it. Thank you, man.
It's been a pleasure.
All right, that's the episode. Remember, you can find contact information for guests in the show notes or on our website, livingadaptive.com. On livingadaptive.com, you can also find previous episodes, writings, and a bunch of other good stuff. So go there. Peace.